That's about as happy as I would get right there. I'm Tim Kaufman. I'm from Alden, New York. I'm actually a school teacher, high school teacher. I teach engineering and technology, and I went plant-based vegan it'll be 10 years coming up in January.
So was that 2012?
Yes, it's 2012.
So why? Why would you do that?
Well, I am probably the most unlikely candidate for a vegan or plant-based lifestyle. I grew up in a very rural area. I worked on a dairy farm. We had raised all our own animals. We grew all our own meat. We milked cows. And I was an avid hunter and fisherman. And basically my plate consisted of mostly meat and cheese with as few veggies as possible. This is a very unlikely place that I'm at now. But I guess if you want to unpack my why, it's kind of my whole story. I was born with this disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic screw up of the collagen in my body. So the glue that kind of holds my body together is super loose and like bubble gum. When I got into my early 20s from doing manual labor, I had destroyed many of the joints in my body. My shoulder was probably the worst. It would dislocate with movement, but it got to the point where I would sneeze and just the pressure from my chest would actually dislocate my shoulder. Went to the doctor. He said I need this surgery called an arthroplasty. They were just going to tighten up the shoulder, pull everything together and patch me up and I'd be on my way. When they opened me up, that's when they found that I had this disease, which there's no cure for it. You only kind of maintain the symptoms. And one of the ways that they maintained it was told me to do as little as possible because I would likely be in a wheelchair by the time I turned 25. The other way that they dealt with it is pain management. I had never taken any medicine. My family wasn't real big into medicine. So I got on this drug, kind of a Lortab kind of drug. And it was the first time I'd ever had a controlled substance or a narcotic. And, that was, like I say, in my early 20s, and that kind of set off this cycle of, obviously you build up a tolerance, so my body got used to it. And then we would just keep upping the dose, and then eventually we would go from Lortab to, Percocets to Oxys. And over the years, I was taking this just to kind of feel normal. And then my doctor prescribed me a drug called fentanyl, which at the time, no one really knew what fentanyl was. I had never heard of it. And of course, now we all know what it is. And that was like a 24-hour supply. It was a transdermal patch. On top of that, I was still taking all the other tablet opioids, and I was still in horrific pain. I couldn't sleep through the night, and I'm kind of fast forwarding here, but through the years, I became very heavily addicted to these things. And then I got into alcohol because it just wasn't enough. So the first time I ever really had alcohol to go to sleep at night, I put about 25 tablets in my hand, opioids, took them and chased it down with an entire liter of vodka, and I passed out. And that would become my new normal every day. And along with the drugs and the alcohol, food also became a drug of choice. And the thing about food, it was a lot easier for me to get because it was everywhere. Everywhere you went, I didn't even have to get out of my truck. I just pull up to a window, and it was all those same dopamine hits, and it was actually the same kind of process. I'd feel like really excited, I'm gonna get my food. It would taste delicious, and then I'd crumple up the wrappers and look at them, and I'd start feeling regret, knowing that this stuff was damaging me, but I just couldn't stop. So these 4 things were my escapes from reality. And as an addict, you become very selfish, and your whole world kind of closes in. The only thing that matters is you and trying to pass out to get to the next day, and that kind of became my life. I'm a father of 2 kids. They're older now, in their late 20s. I've been married for almost 30 years to an amazing person that I'd probably be dead without her. But somehow those monsters creep in, and they make you so selfish, and to the point where I couldn't be a good dad, I couldn't be a good husband. While I'm all centered on myself, we get a phone call, and my wife Heather, her mom had been like kind of a cold flu kind of thing for a while. We finally convinced her to go to a doctor. She went to a doctor, and she was diagnosed with leukemia. this kind of flipped our whole world upside down. Heather's mom, was like a second mom to me because we had started dating, so we were young teenagers. And it really kind of flipped perspective for me to start looking outside myself. And we were just tossed into this whole system of cancer and chemo and transfusions, and she was getting sicker and sicker. I think when we started going to that hospital, I started getting a little dose of perspective that I complained how bad my joints hurt every day, but I got to go home, and I didn't have cancer in my body, and I wasn't waiting for my next chemo. I had it bad, but there was a lot of people that would give anything to have my bad. So that kind of really woke me up to maybe gratitude, you could say. And at the same time we're dealing with that, my father had a cold that wouldn't go away. We thought he had a touch of pneumonia, and he went to his doctor. They x-rayed his chest, and he was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer that had metastasized through his whole body. My dad was my best friend in the whole world. We did everything together. We hunted together, we fished together, we built stuff together. He was my best buddy, and the doctors gave him 6 months to live. My dad made it 6 weeks to the day of his diagnosis, and he lost his battle. And then shortly after that, Heather's mom lost her battle, which went from leukemia to lymphoma, and then ultimately a brain tumor would take her life. And we just lost 2 of our favorite people in the whole world. And it was a real wake-up call for me, one, to show me how precious life is, and 2, to show me where I was going to be very shortly. I had gotten so bad, my kidneys were shutting down multiple times. My metabolic numbers were out of control, and I was over 400 pounds. My doctor said I was well over 400 pounds. We don't really know how much over because they literally couldn't weigh me anymore. I was on 20 prescriptions a month. My numbers were out of control. And for some reason, after we got done with the funerals and really stuff that we shouldn't have had to plan, I woke up one morning, went downstairs, and Heather used to put my socks and shoes on me because I physically couldn't do it. And she did this most mornings, and this one morning, I looked at her eyes and I'm like, she's gonna have to plan my funeral. Like, I'm not gonna make it another year. I think that reality was not about me, it was about having her raising 2 kids and trying to do life alone. And I figured I owed it to my father and her mom to at least try something. So I went on YouTube because, of course, that's what we do for good medical information. And I found this thing called bariatric surgery. I was super excited. A guy over 400 pounds running a marathon the next year. I'm like, this is my, hit that button and I'm good to go. So I did all the paperwork. I went to a couple meetings on it. I went to classes on it. Was all set, really pumped up for it. And when I went to my doctor, all he had to do was sign off on the surgery. My blood pressure was 255 over 115. And I was already on 2 blood pressure medicines. My heart rate was over 125, and I had been sitting for almost an hour. And the doctor was really worried with all the narcotics I was on, how my body would react to the anesthesia, and he denied the surgery for me. So, I was devastated, and I thought I was done, it was hopeless. So I went home that day, and I'm like, that's it. Now it's kind of not my fault, right? Now it's my doctor's fault. But something just watching 2 people, not just watching them die, but watching them try to live just one more day to spend with their family. You can't not owe them the respect to try something. I tried a diet, and I went on the thing that I thought I could do, which was keto, because it made sense to me. That was always, kind of how I'd eaten anyways. And then the other thing I try to do is kind of move a little bit more. So I had a lot of trouble getting out of a chair. So what I would do is if I stood up out of my chair in my office, I would sit back down, and then I would stand back up. And that doesn't sound like much, but I was doubling my exercise for the day, essentially. And I did everything wrong at that point, but I at least recognized that what was going into my mouth was affecting my body. And I did lose weight. I mean, at over 400 pounds, it's not real hard to lose weight, but I still felt like crap. I was still on all my meds. I still felt really foggy. And then I was sitting on my couch watching Netflix, and I saw this title, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, pop up in my feed. And I really didn't look too closely at what was going on, but I'm like, dang, that describes me. So I hit play. And the film is about Joe Cross coming to the US from Australia, and he does a 60-day juice fast, consumes nothing but fruit and vegetable juice out of his machine. And it was so inspiring to me that I'm like, I ordered a juicer before the credits rolled, and I'm like, January's coming up, this is what I'm doing. But I never really thought about what I was getting into. I mean, this is, my idea was like a 2-pound taco was like my ultimate goal. And we didn't buy vegetables. Our grocery shopping consisted of boxed food, and I went out for fast food probably 4 times a day. And then we ate out, every night. Maybe 1 or 2 days we'd be home. So this whole idea of fruits and vegetables, like where do you even get these things from? And my first juice, the first juice I made, I got this like little bag of vegetables from the gas station, put it through the juicer, and like 2 spoons came out, and it's like, okay, I'm in trouble. So the one thing that did do is it got us shopping. It got me excited about finding kale that was on sale. I'd be like yelling across the store. So I went on the juice fast January 1st, and the first 3 days were absolute hell. By the 4th day, my hunger kind of subsided. And the 5th day, I'll never forget this. This is like, I've told this story hundreds of times, I still get goosebumps, but on the 5th day, I woke up in the morning and I was in exactly the same position that I had fell asleep. And for years, that's all I wanted to do was be able to sleep through the night, not in pain. And so that's 5 days on raw juice. As the fast went on, I would forget to take medicine. I was feeling better. I was, actually getting up before my alarm instead of Heather having to like roll me out of bed. I was just feeling better, like day by day. It was amazing how fast this change took place. At the end of the juice fast, I'm like, I don't know what to do now. This is 30 days. I had lost like probably 40 pounds by then. Felt fantastic. Color was coming back into my skin. I said I can't juice the rest of my life. But because I watched Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, the next thing that came up as a suggestion was forks over knives. I tell people that forks over knives, it didn't just change my life, but it gave me a completely new one. It's one thing to have your life saved through food, but my life, there's nothing that's been unturned in my life, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, through this way of eating. And then because I watched Forks Over Knives, of course, I started getting, seeing all these little breadcrumbs that led to other research and stuff. And honestly, it was frustrating for me the first time I saw Forks Over Knives, because we had just buried 2 of our most precious people in the world that died of cancer, and then you have Dr. Campbell saying he can turn cancer on and off, and it was just like, why don't people know about this? Why don't people know that there's such a profound effect on what we eat, not only for our health, but for the environment, for the animals, for everything, and no one talks about it. We just keep advertising crappy food that's hyper palatable, but at the same time, I'm feeling better with food. I still have EDS, right? So I'm supposed to do as little as I possibly can, but I had a ton of energy. Our first walk that me and Heather ever did together, I didn't really find a purpose to walk when we had cars, but we went on our first walk together, and it was supposed to be 1.5 miles, and I couldn't even make it halfway. So Heather and the kids picked me up and took me home. I almost went to the emergency room, because my knees dislocate every step I take. Something inside me wanted to go back and finish that walk, and so I waited till I healed up, and I went back and finished that walk, and that 3-mile walk turned into 5 miles, and before I knew it, I picked up a pair of hiking boots, and I started hiking places on the Appalachian Trail, and I really got into hiking and got my family involved. Looking back, it's so easy to see what I couldn't see at the time. Food I was eating was driving the inflammation out of my joints. And with the muscles I was developing, what that was doing is taking over for where my joints were failing me. So those two things kind of unsnowballed all these issues that I have. I'll always have EDS, it's a genetic condition, but I have very few symptoms of the chronic pain anymore. So I went from hiking, someone showed me a picture of the Adirondack Mountains. My cousin went up on a high peak, showed me a picture, and he said, you really have to see this with your own eyes. The pictures don't do it justice. So I went to my doctor and I'm like, I'm gonna be climbing a mountain, so you gotta help me out. And at the time I was in these things called immobilizers, where they had locked my knees out, so I couldn't bend. And the idea was to save the joints like that, right? So he said, well, let's hook you up with braces you can actually bend in. And I went to a company, they casted my legs, they made braces for me, and I just started climbing stairs every day. You know, first it was 5 or 6, and then that turned into 20, and then hundreds, and then I would just time it. And I worked really hard all winter just climbing stairs, and I summited my first high peak. I was down to 1 brace at that point, and it was crazy magical. Like, it was unbelievable that I was supposed to be in a wheelchair, and I'm standing, you know, on a 4,000-foot peak that I was up there on my own ability, which was crazy. And, you know, the more I saw how the food was fueling me and the fitness, if you want to call it, or the movement was helping my body, I just kept going. And then I got into running a little bit, and we started a 5K, and then we did a 10K. I actually ran my first half marathon with a valid handicap parking pass, and I did that so I could go park in a handicap spot while I ran. There were no spaces left, but it would have worked. And then I got into marathons, and then eventually a couple of the cool things are, you know, my kids on that walk with me the first time, there's this picture floating around with just this miserable look of me on the trail, and we got together again on the trail because they were my pacers for my 50-mile ultra, which was super special. And I told you about how they're putting my socks and shoes on me. I got to return the favor because for our anniversary, we went to New Hampshire, and she was having trouble getting her backpack on. Only we were 6,700 feet in the air because we had just summited at Mount Washington. And that was just the coolest thing ever. And it's just been this Doppler effect, and my choices affecting other. Heather's lost 90 pounds, turned into a beast runner. So together we've lost close to 300 pounds, and our whole life has changed. And, you know, we're super passionate about helping other people do this and coming to conferences. And so, yeah, that's my why. That was a very long why.
Is she doing this 100% too with you?
Yeah. So it took her about 2 years. So I had no idea how to cook, and now we have a plant-based restaurant.
Really?
Yeah, so I had no idea how to cook. So I just started really simple. I mean, I knew how to make beans, I knew how to make potatoes. Then eventually, Heather and the kids kept picking at my food, stealing my food, until finally I got to the point where I was cooking stir fries. And I'm like, you guys can add whatever you want, but this is what I'm eating. And then eventually it's just like, it's not worth it. Through that process, Heather had a medical issue that she went into the hospital for. When she was laying in the hospital bed, she just got taken back to all the things with her mom. And I walked in, and when I was picking her up, she goes, that's it. I'm going 100%. She goes, you know, I don't know what tomorrow holds. I could die from anything, but I'm going to do everything I can to be healthy. And it was a switch for her. And yeah, she actually, I remember that day we came home, I grabbed a pretzel. She goes, there's salt on that. And I'm like, oh, here we go.
Nice.
So yeah, so she, you know, she flipped the switch. Her too, I mean, she didn't run till well into her 40s. You know, we avoided all that stuff as much as we could. So it's just been a beautiful journey together. And to see her, again, she's still not a real strong cooker, but we have a cafe we started in the Buffalo area, and I think we pushed out probably 50,000 meals in the past year and a half for meal prep. So,
what is it called?
Flourish Cafe, yeah.
And is it? You said meal prep? Is it just like a regular come sit down restaurant?
It is. That's a lot smaller. So we started right before COVID. When COVID hit, we kind of converted our back room into a kitchen and just start doing takeout meals, and that kind of evolved into a meal prep. But you can still come in, sit down, and we have all oil-free, obviously no animal products, oil-free, salt-free, and refined sugar-free. So.
What about your kids? Are they doing it too?
So, well, my son hasn't lived home in a while, but he's probably more vegan. But yeah, he, they slip because they go out and stuff. But for the most part, I would say they're 90% vegan.
It's a little harder when you don't raise them that way.
It is. Yeah, and I think like through my journey, I don't think anyone thought, I didn't even know how long it would last. Like I didn't even think about that. So I knew it needed to do something. But then after you feel the results, like I don't know how you could ever go back.
Was there ever a time before you did this that you thought there's no way I could do this?
Honestly, I was so far the other way. Not only would I not think about it, I didn't know what vegan meant. I mean, I grew up on a dairy farm. Like the only sense of like that there was something even remotely contradictory about how we ate was I can remember when I was a kid going into the woods. If we hunted like closer, like instead of like really in the backwoods, my dad always told me there might be cars up here, and I didn't know, he didn't even call them vegans, that would be like banging pots and pans to scare the, and that was like, and I didn't even like recognize that as a thing until like later in life, that, oh, that's what vegans are, So no, I was so far the other way that it just never occurred to me. And this is why I'm so, in fact, I'll be honest with you, the first big deer I ever shot, I have tattooed right on me.
Oh, wow, let me see.
And through the years...
Right here?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Phoenix is all about transformation. Yeah, I got carried away with it.
All right, so, and then this is the deer right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Through the years, I had this tattoo on me, and this is no joke. I'm at Asha Farm Sanctuary. We're emceeing an event, and I'm singing Happy Birthday to a rescue cow. Someone at the event saw my tattoo, and they're like, oh, what is that? And I'm just honest, like, that's the first big buck that I ever shot. And they're like, you should get that covered up. And that kind of bothered me. I went home and I'm like, yeah, I should get that covered up. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. It's part of who I was. So instead of covering it up, I had an artist take a picture of one of our favorite trails we used to run. So that's, he kind of put a background around it. So it's kind of like the new life that I have is our favorite waterfall. And at the top of it, you can actually see me and Heather running. So I started kind of filling around it and just kind of crowding out my old life. And that culture, and this is why I'm real quick not to judge people, because that culture, like everything was attached to that lifestyle for me. That was how me and my dad spent time together. I mean, if we weren't hunting or fishing, we might have been in the garden or fixing cars or something, but that was just my culture. Like that's every friend I had, every event I did, it was all based around this hunting and fishing. And the reality is I would rather talk to people about what an outdoorsman really is, because I thought I was an outdoorsman at that time. Like that's how I identified as an outdoorsman. But the reality is, when you start hiking, climbing mountains, and taking pictures of stuff, like I spent way more time outdoors than I ever did. I mean, an outdoorsman is not sitting on a four-wheeler, climbing into a tree stand and sitting on your butt for the day. Get out and explore. You can have all those same kind of things without the animals, and so, yeah, so that was my culture. And so I think that's why it was never a thing for me, because I didn't know there was anything else but what I was raised as,
This EDS, your body's able to produce collagen now eating plants, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yes.
sometimes people say, oh, I supplement that. Like, I'm like, why?
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah. So my body makes collagen.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I probably should learn this, but I don't know the particulars. I don't remember what chromosome, but one of the chromosomes, I think it's like 26. It's one off from MS, whatever that is. Because one of my sisters has multiple sclerosis. The other one has EDS as well. And whatever that chromosome is sends the wrong signal, and that's why you get the stretch. So my body still makes collagen It's just super stretchy.
Oh, okay. But you don't have to supplement collagen?
No.
Okay.
No, the only thing I supplement is B12, and I live in Buffalo, so sometimes I'll do a vitamin D in the winter. Yeah. So that's another interesting thing from the health perspective. My insurance company in 2009 paid over $20,000 just for pharmaceuticals alone, just for 12 months of pharmaceuticals, over 20,000. And then in 2015 and 16, I contacted the insurance company to get a combined total on the pharmaceuticals that I had purchased, and it was under $120, and that was for vitamin B12. So, you know, when you start seeing these results, I actually reached out to the insurance company. I'm like, this is so easy. Like, if we can duplicate this, we don't have a health crisis, right? It's gone. Because if everyone can save this kind of money just by changing what they eat, why aren't we doing this, you know?
Did they respond?
A little, you know, they kind of due diligence to it. They sent me all the paperwork, which I was pretty happy, because sometimes it's hard to get, but.
Wow. You said you have some relatives that have MS and some other things going on. I've heard of some people having those same issues and going plant-based and resolving that.
Sure, yeah. I know Dr. McDougall does a lot of work with multiple sclerosis patients and has had great success. My family has kind of hopped on and off the plant-based train. We're all food addicts, to be honest with you. My whole family is food addicts. That's the one thing that is genetic. The things like the high cholesterol and things like that they told me were genetic were definitely not. I don't know if you want to go there, but my metabolic numbers, my cholesterol was always over 300 on Lipitor. It's down to actually 102 at my last check.
Your total cholesterol is 102?
102, yeah. My
total cholesterol?
Total cholesterol, yeah. I have the screenshots if you want to see it. My blood pressure is totally normal. And again, that's from 255 over 115 on a calcium channel blocker and a beta blocker, which obviously I don't take those anymore. I was pre-diabetic, but I fixed that because he gave me prescriptions for metformin and I would just drop them in the garbage because I figure I wouldn't, I wasn't going to take them anyways. So all these, you know, chronic illnesses and prescriptions, they just faded out, you know, and it's kind of the same with the addiction. Fentanyl is a very difficult addiction to break. And statistically, there's not a lot of success. But what I've learned personally with food and trying to escape reality and life in general, that if we can crowd our life with good stuff, we don't have room for the bad stuff. And I feel like sometimes when I share my story, I just kind of leave the addiction thing out and then just assume that everyone knows them. That was a battle in itself, but I'm convinced that, you know, eating plants had a huge, profound effect on me being able to break these addictions. I was just looking to escape pain and hopelessness, right? When you start getting one aspect in your life that you get hope in and you get healing in, it's almost impossible to keep it in that spot. I tripped up a few times on the opioids. I've been clean and sober for probably 9 years now. The fentanyl was the hardest thing to go. I did the alcohol cold turkey, which was not suggesting. I think people need to go get help. They need to go seek out help and do it the right way. The opioids, I quit cold turkey. I went back a couple times when my father passed away. I went back on them for a short time. But the fentanyl was hell. The best way not to have to get off fentanyl is not take it the first time. But what I did for that is every time I put a patch on, I would cut a sliver off, and eventually got to where I didn't need any at all. But I think the key here is crowd your life with good stuff, you know. With our inputs, the food we eat, the stuff we listen to, the stuff we watch, if we get enough good inside, the bad will kind of just disappear. And that's true for our plate and our mind and everything.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when I did this fasting, I only did like a 2-day fast or something.
Sure.
But I was so used to snacking and eating. The first day I was kind of feeling a little uneasy detoxing, you know.
Sure.
And had to fight the compulsion toward, you know, going in the kitchen and just grabbing something. Then the next day it was like I just found myself busier doing things I needed to do. And the busier I got, the longer I could go without eating. I could only imagine in my mind now, if I didn't have so many things to do that were great, it would be easy just to sit at home and just eat and,
Sure.
and then get in this routine of just eating myself to death, basically. And
Yeah.
you covered that by saying crowd yourself
Yeah.
with good. But sometimes that's hard to do because we're surrounded by so many miserable people.
Right.
And there's such a dearth of community. Where do people go to surround themselves with good?
Yeah.
You've managed to do that and become very strong at doing that. I wonder if you could speak on that. How can people surround themselves with good? And one of the secrets of success is to gravitate toward people that are more successful than you.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is probably way beyond the scope, but that's a super interesting point in life in general. The problem that, like, as humans, when we kind of know that if we want to, like, for running, like they say, if you want to run faster, run with faster friends, right? But that's not a very comfortable place to be, right? Because if I'm running with a group of everyone slower, then I'm top dog, you know, you know what I mean? So you have to be willing to step out of that comfort to hang out with people that are better at this thing than you. The cool part about that is, like, I picture this, like, people reaching down to pull the other person up that's a little bit behind them. But then you have a responsibility, right, to reach back. And if everyone just does that, we have this, like, amazing momentum that kind of provides its own energy, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Sometimes I get people that say, oh, well, you know, I know people who've been vegan and they had to go back to eating animal protein. And they started looking bad and feeling bad. And did you have any transitional discomfort, whether in the beginning or even more so later on, where you were just trying to figure out proper eating times and proper ways of eating, like bloating and gas and just uncomfortable or any kind of discomfort?
As much of a nightmare as my life was, it was a blessing. So these past couple of years, EDS, I still have symptoms, I still have the disease. This had nothing to do with COVID, but when COVID hit, for the past 2 years, I have been almost on my back. I was very active, very fit. I reached up in the air one morning stretching, and my legs just kind of turned off. My spine was impinged really bad. Like on the MRI, it looks like my spine is just severed. Because of the EDS, everything had shifted, pinching my spine right off. It just, like, happened so fast. It was so weird. So instead of fusing my back, they cut 4 of my 5 lumbar, the loops that kind of hold your spine in. So now my spine is, like, laying on the outside of them, so it has room to open back up. That's taken me out of commission. And then after that, my ankle has been really jacked up for a long time, since I was a kid. And I went to a specialist, got it rebuilt. It was failed surgery. I couldn't put weight on it for about 3 years. I went to an orthopedic guy, and he goes, you have 2 options. We can do an amputation, or we can do a full fusion. And I was petrified of the fusion. These are all broken bones. The bones were crumbling so bad they were trying to get out my skin. This is what it looked like on the outside. And then when I got my fusion, you can see I still have my staples in. And I'm 80% fused in under 2 weeks there, which is absolutely unheard of. Doctor's never seen anything like it. My body's ability to heal. So I told him my eating regime, and I hope he shares it with his patients. On both of those surgeries were very extensive surgeries. I mean, basically they removed my foot, they removed 4 inches of my fibula, they cut my talus bone, my tibia, they bolted everything together. And this is the same way I feel about food as I feel about drugs. When I went into that hospital, I said, I will not have this surgery if you put any opioids at all in my IV or anywhere. I had the whole, like, OR bawling just to tell my story. And I feel that strong that I'd rather walk around with no leg than I would take an opioid. And that's kind of how I feel about food. When you have such a profound change from food, you'd rather die than go back. And, like, I totally mean that. So for me, it's an easy choice. I think we don't have to wait for chronic illness to set in. We don't have to wait for tragedy. We don't have to wait for all these things. Like, we can change now, today. But sometimes there's no urgency on it. So I think many times people that go through these heart attacks and these near-death experiences, they almost have an easier time because they eat like their life depends on it. But this is true for everyone, whether we've had this experience or not. So to answer your question, I would rather die then go back to the way I was eating.
And that's a great way to answer my question. It doesn't feel like it's really totally answering my question unless you really think about it. What I'm hearing you say is you have to endure those difficulties and have enough faith that eventually you'll find the right way to make it work.
Sure.
That's going to be better than the alternative.
Absolutely. Yeah, and everyone is a little different, you know, and I do a little experiment when I was trying to grow bone really fast. I did worry about macros, I did worry about protein, I did worry about calcium, but for the past 10 years, I mean, I have a 500-pound deadlift, right? I mean, I'm not a weak guy. I've run 50-mile ultras, I do 100-mile bike rides. I've never like supplemented protein or none of that stuff. It's just never been on my mind. You know, if I know I'm training really hard or if I'm getting back into weight training, you know, I'll eat some extra lentils. Like, we don't have to make it this complicated. Like, it's food, and our body is amazing at figuring out what to do with stuff and how to deal with stuff. I think I've been doing this long enough now, the first 3 years. My website's called Fat Man Rants because all I did was rant at people, because it was always, no one ever gave two craps what I ate when I was 400 pounds, right? But as soon as I'm vegan, oh my God, you're gonna die, you know? I'd have a double order of chicken wings in front of me, you know, with grease dripping out of my chin, and no one said a word. But, you know, your muscles are gonna dissolve from protein and your bones from calcium. I've been doing this long enough that I don't even, like, whatever, I'm so sick of talking about protein.
Looking back, like doing a compare and contrast, you were getting a lot of enjoyment before you went plant-based from eating. You were getting tons of enjoyment.
Sure.
It sounds like it was maybe so satiating or so tantalizing. It was at the cost of your life. This moment of eating this chicken or whatever it is, this moment is more important than my whole life.
Yeah.
And now it's the reverse.
100%.
And I think people have a hard time hearing that message because they don't realize that they can feel better using food as fuel to do great things.
Yeah.
I think that's what you've totally come to realize.
Yeah, and there's actually another whole aspect to that. I don't even know how long I've been doing the same kind of presentation. My presentations have started to change almost because of that same concept, but in a bigger picture. So you're right. Before, food was pleasure, it was comfort, it was like a little blanket for me. It just tasted good, made me feel good, it was very temporary, and I didn't really care about the outcome. Now, once you flip that equation and realize that, what can this food do for me? You know, what can this food do for my body? What can this food do for, you know, the earth, the animals? What, you know, there's, not only are the effects of what we eat on other things, but there's effects in our body, you know, and this conference is great. On a cellular level, everything changes. But so when you start learning that food is a tool for lifestyle, there's also a bigger picture in here. This is why a lot of people fall off, and I've been really like hammering on this. I have a whole series I do on this. One of the things that I think hurts people in this movement is that we eat food to get healthy, and we're making all these investments in our health. We say that our health is our wealth. So we're investing in everything, every choice we make to build habits, to build routines. These are all like little mini investments into our health. But if we don't do anything with our health, it's all worthless. And so what I'm seeing is people, they lose 50 pounds, they get off meds, they do all these things to sit on a couch and watch Netflix. What is the point of getting healthy, right? So when we realize that our health is a tool for a lifestyle, right? Now we have something sustainable. Because if I make good choices at my plate, my lifestyle is better. Then it becomes, your health is a tool for lifestyle. Without the lifestyle piece, people just flip. I mean, I deal with thousands of people that go right back to the way they used to eat, you know? Because they're not spending that investment. When they make the investment in their health, they have to spend it by changing their lifestyle. Go on adventures, help you. This world is hurting, go help people. You know, use your health for a lifestyle. And I think that's key for sustainability.
Do you have a quote you want to share?
Well, the quote that I got coined, the news picked this up one time, and I kind of wish I could undo it, but it's 10 years old. I had a news anchor one time ask me, in one word, what's the best advice I could give people that are starting out? And so I'm known for Fat Man Rant's quote is, eat plants, move your body. All you got to do is a little bit more than you did yesterday. And that's it.
You have a website, right?
Yeah, it's fatmanrants.com. Super active on Facebook. Heather and I try to do a live every Sunday. We cook in our kitchen with people.
And then how do they find you on Facebook?
Well, Fat Man Rants. Anything Fat Man Rants, we're everywhere, yeah.